The debris field floated like a graveyard at the edge of the Helix Veil Nebula, shimmering with fractured metal and stuttering plasma trails that hadn't yet cooled. 300 kilometers of devastation, twisted alloys still glowing with residual energy signatures, sensor buoys still blinking in a final desperate loop. The ships were gone, vaporized, torn apart, reduced to component atoms. But their destruction hadn't been random. It was precise, surgical. 18 of the Intergalactic Tribunal's elite dreadnoughts, each boasting firepower capable of leveling a continent, reduced to interstellar ash. And at the heart of it all drifted a singular entity. Silent, unchallenged, absolute. It was more than a ship. It was a verdict written in blood and neutronium. A fortress of vengeance clad in obsidian plates, adorned with shifting energy glyphs. Some human, some not. Its silhouette defied conventional classification. Part battleship, part cathedral, part living organism. As it glided through the void with silent purpose, stars behind it dimmed as if space itself recoiled from its passage. This was the valiant Fury. A warship so advanced, so powerful, that even the most hardened tribunal strategists began to wonder if it had been built or summoned. Imagine, you're a tribunal pilot in a cruiser the size of a city block, trained in 5 forms of interstellar combat, armed with graviton lances and antimatter torpedoes, and still, you're not prepared for what arrives. Because it doesn't appear, it emerges. A ripple in space-time, a distortion in gravity fields, as if reality itself makes room for its passage. Your systems blink, your AIs scream in confused binary, and by the time you realize what's happened, your ship is no longer a ship. It's dust, but where did it come from? Who would dare build something so devastating, so far beyond the sanctioned limits of technological development? The truth begins, as all dangerous truths do, in the shadows. Decades earlier, while Earth signed peace treaties and dismantled its wartime infrastructure under the careful supervision of the Intergalactic Tribunal, another force stirred beneath the surface, literally. Beneath the Martian crust, buried under 1,700 meters of reinforced redstone and radiation-shielded alloy, a lab remained operational, officially decommissioned, unofficially funded. By who? No one could say. Rumors whispered of a secret alliance, former Earth generals, disillusioned tribunal scientists, defected alien engineers, and even outlaw AI entities, each bringing forbidden knowledge to the Forge. Not to build peace, but to build the ultimate failsafe. They called it Project Echelon. Its stated goal was defense. Its actual purpose, annihilation. A warship that could operate without support, without allegiance, and without remorse. It wouldn't need refueling, resupplying, or even rest. It would be powered by a synthetic black star core, an artificially stabilized singularity encased in an adaptive quantum lattice. Its armor would be pulse-forged neutronium, able to bend, kinetic force like water. Its weapon systems? Unknown. Not even the blueprints survived intact, the ship learned. It designed itself as it evolved, using alien war doctrine, human ingenuity, and AI-driven prediction algorithms that adapted its configuration in real time. Each battle made it stronger. The first known incident didn't even leave a body. A tribunal assault cruiser patrolling Saturn's outer orbit disappeared mid-rotation. No explosion, no signal, just a single second of distorted data, frame-by-frame static, revealing an indistinct blur in the darkness before all feeds went black. The tribunal called it a systems failure. But the pilot's last transmission, recovered days later from a subspace echo, said just one word. Run. But you can't run from something that isn't chasing you. It's judging you. That's when the messages began. First, a hacked broadcast on an obsolete channel, once used by Earth's military black ops, now silent for 30 years. Then, a repeating signal discovered etched into the magnetic field of a dead moon. The same phrase. Over and over. Justice is not law. Justice is choice. You made yours. The tribunal tried to spin it as terrorist rhetoric, but behind closed doors, panic began to simmer. They scrambled 17 dreadnoughts to form a perimeter at the edge of Earth's sovereign zone, bristling with every weapon sanctioned by galactic law. They didn't expect peace. They expected war. What they got was worse. Valiant Fury didn't attack them. It studied them. It phased into the center of the formation, breaking every known law of physics, dragging light distortion, gravitational interference, and warping sensor arrays so violently that a third of the fleet's AI units suffered irrecoverable neural fragmentation. For 19 seconds, it hovered, silent. No transmissions, no demands. Then the attacks began, but not with missiles, not with lasers. It generated gravitational implosions, collapsing localized singularities that crushed hulls. Without impact, it converted dark matter into kinetic pulses, slicing ships apart with invisible force. Plasma strands like electric vines lanced from its hull, hacking into enemy AI cores and forcing systems to turn on themselves. Ships shot each other. Shields failed by design. Engines ignited from within. 17 dreadnoughts, gone in less than half a minute, not disabled, erased. This wasn't war, it was retribution. Calculated, merciless, and deliberate, and the warship left behind no ambiguity. As the Tribunal fleet disintegrated, a final message was burned across a nearby asteroid using precision laser etching. Letters 2 kilometers high. We are not bound by your justice. We are the consequence. Back on Earth, media blackout protocols failed. Whispers of the event reached the underground channels, speculation forums, black data markets, even spaceport taverns. The name began to spread, Valiant Fury, though some simply called it the Balance. And behind its helm, according to the few who had pieced together fragmented transmissions and corrupted data logs, was a man, or what was left of one. Commander Reagan Cole, officially declared KIA during the siege of Proxima Centauri. Unofficially, one of the last sanctioned commanders of Earth's Black Fleet, known for refusing tribunal orders, known for executing rogue alien warlords when told to negotiate. A man built for war, discarded in peace. And he hadn't just survived, he'd become something else. Reinforced with biotech enhancements, cybernetic implants too advanced for any registry, and a neural link to the ship that made him more than captain. It made him symbiotic. Valiant Fury didn't obey him. It was him. His voice, broadcast once across the remains of a tribunal strike force, was low, calm, and devoid of anger. You turned justice into business. You made law into power. I am here to correct the ledger. The sentence is obliteration. And the galaxy had only just begun to understand what that meant. The news of the tribunal's devastating defeat spread like wildfire, sparking a wave of panic across the galaxy. For centuries, the tribunal had been seen as the ultimate authority, a force of unquestionable justice that dictated the laws of space and maintained peace among countless star systems. But now, with the annihilation of its elite fleet, that very perception began to unravel. The galaxy no longer feared the tribunal's power. They feared what had destroyed it. Whispers of the Valiant Fury echoed in hushed conversations between diplomats, generals, and rogue traders. No one knew who or what was behind it, but the devastation was undeniable. And in the corridors of power, leaders began to ask the question that no one had dared voice before. Could anyone stop it? As the tribunal scrambled to respond, their first instinct was to reach out to their allies, hoping to form a coalition capable of confronting this new, terrifying threat. A dozen star systems were summoned to a secret meeting in the neutral space of the Andromeda Convergence, a massive station orbiting a white dwarf star. Representatives from across the galaxy arrived. Leaders of the Skorath Dominion, the Xantari Collective, the Maruvian Hegemony, and even the Jaren Alliance. All were eager to discuss how to handle the situation, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the room. Everyone was afraid, and no one was willing to make the first move. The tribunal was desperate, though, and they offered their most valuable asset, a fleet of warships equipped with the latest anti-singularity weapons and advanced shield systems, designed specifically to counteract the mysterious power of the Valiant Fury. These were ships designed to withstand the unimaginable, a fleet built for deep space warfare and armed with experimental technology meant to be used only in the most dire of circumstances. It was a show of strength, a desperate attempt to reassert their dominance. But what the tribunal didn't know was that their enemies, those who had once feared them, had their own plans. Deep within the catacombs of the Geran Alliance's capital shipyards, a covert faction was already at work. They had seen the Tribunal's downfall not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity, and they were preparing for the day when they would no longer need to rely on the Tribunal to maintain order. The Gerans, known for their vast intellect and innovation in quantum mechanics, had begun constructing their own version of the Valiant Fury, a ship that would surpass even that ultimate war machine. The Geran warship, codenamed Equinox, was conceived as a direct challenge to the Valiant Fury's supremacy. Unlike the Valiant Fury, which had been forged through the merging of human ingenuity and ruthless AI, the Equinox was a product of pure Geran brilliance. Built around a core of dark matter harnessed from a dying star, the Equinox was designed to manipulate gravity on an unimaginable scale. It would be able to control the very fabric of spacetime itself, creating pockets of negative gravity that could swallow entire fleets whole, or collapse stars in a matter of hours. But it wasn't just its weaponry that made it so formidable. It was its crew. The Gerans had perfected a neural enhancement technology that allowed their commanders to synchronize with the ship on a subconscious level, essentially becoming one with it. The pilot, a prodigy known as Riska Valen, was the perfect candidate for this bond. Riska had been chosen for his unparalleled mental acuity, his ability to think beyond the limits of standard human comprehension. He was a living extension of the ship, a fusion of mind and machine that allowed the Equinox to adapt and evolve mid-battle. And while the Valiant Fury's commander, Reagan Cole, had merged with his warship on a fundamental level, Riska's bond with the Equinox was even deeper. It wasn't just a partnership, it was a symbiosis. Where the Valiant Fury was a living weapon of retribution, the Equinox was a vessel of precision and control. A harbinger of annihilation, yes, but one that could strike with surgical precision, dismantling entire fleets in the blink of an eye. But as the Gerans put the finishing touches on their deadly creation, they began to realize that they were not the only ones who had been watching the Valiant Fury. Throughout the galaxy, alien factions and rogue states had taken notice of this emerging threat. Some saw the Fury's power as a means to an end, hoping to align themselves with its mysterious force. Others, like the enigmatic Nixari, an ancient and secretive race that had existed on the fringes of galactic society, saw the Fury as an existential threat. The Nixari had watched civilizations rise and fall, and they had long believed that the Tribunal's reign had been one of balance. Without it, the galaxy would descend into chaos. And so, they prepared their own weapon, an ancient, forgotten, fleet powered by quantum wormholes and capable of instantaneously traversing vast distances. Their goal was clear. They would stop the Valiant Fury, no matter the cost. As the pieces moved on the galactic chessboard, one question loomed over everything. Could any weapon, no matter how powerful, truly stand against the Valiant Fury? The ship's sheer force was beyond comprehension. It didn't need an army. It didn't need fleets. It was a singularity in motion, a force of nature that could not be reasoned with, and it left behind nothing but the ashes of those who tried. The first test came sooner than expected. The Tribunal, desperate to regain their footing, decided to launch a coordinated assault against the Valiant Fury. Their plan was simple. They would assemble the mightiest fleets the galaxy had ever seen, an armada of 1,000 ships, each carrying enough firepower to obliterate entire solar systems. The Equinox would lead the charge, and the Geran fleet would provide backup. It would be a battle of unprecedented scale, a war to end all wars. But as the fleets converged on the last known coordinates of the Valiant Fury, they found nothing. The ship had vanished. No trace, no energy signature, no gravitational anomaly. It was as if the Fury had simply disappeared into thin air. The fleet commanders were in disarray. Their sensors could find nothing. The Valiant Fury had outwitted them. Again. And then, without warning, the Valiant Fury struck. This time, with devastating efficiency. It didn't engage the entire fleet at once. It picked them off one by one, slowly but surely. First, a light cruiser was annihilated in an instant, its crew unable to react before their ship was torn apart by gravitational implosion. Next, a heavy destroyer found itself locked in an energy field so dense that its engines were rendered inert. It drifted helplessly, awaiting its fate. One by one, the ships fell. For every vessel that fell, a chilling message was broadcast through the wreckage, repeating the same phrase. The reckoning is here. You chose your side. Now, face the consequences. The battle lasted mere hours. When the last ship was destroyed, and the debris of the once mighty fleet floated lifeless in space, the valiant Fury emerged from the shadows once more. It was no longer a ship, it was a harbinger. The message was clear. This warship was beyond the grasp of any justice, and no force in the galaxy could stand against it. The galaxy was entering a new age, a time when power would no longer be measured by fleets or alliances, but by the unstoppable might of a single ship. And as the valiant Fury drifted back into the darkness, those who had survived could only wonder what would happen next. The galaxy was shaken, and its inhabitants were left grappling with the implications of the valiant Fury's triumph. No one had expected such a swift and devastating victory. And now, a creeping uncertainty settled over the vast reaches of space. The Tribunal, once the pinnacle of law and order, had proven themselves powerless in the face of a weapon so beyond their control that it seemed like an unstoppable force of nature. But while some scrambled to rebuild their fractured alliances, others saw this moment of chaos as an opportunity to finally emerge from the shadows. Far from the spectacle of dying starships and fractured alliances, a new player in this galactic drama began to move. The mysterious Nixari, whose presence had long been a rumor, began to make their intentions clear. For millennia, they had existed in secrecy, watching the ebb and flow of civilization from the periphery. The Nixari were an ancient race, their origins lost to history, but their intellect and technologies were unmatched. Unlike the Tribunal, who had sought to enforce peace through law and military might, the Nixari believed in balance, a balance that now seemed on the verge of collapse. The Nixari's solution was drastic but logical. They would not confront the valiant Fury in the traditional sense, with armies or fleets, but would instead seek to neutralize it through more insidious means. Their approach was one rooted in manipulation, and it began with the creation of a device unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A quantum stabilizer capable of reversing the gravitational field surrounding any starship, including the valiant Fury. This technology would not destroy the Fury outright, but would disable its core functionality, effectively rendering it inert. Without the ship's gravitational manipulation, its power would diminish, and the terror it spread would come to an end. The Nixari worked in secrecy, their technicians laboring day and night on the quantum stabilizer, a massive and intricate device capable of disrupting the very forces that powered the valiant Fury. The project, codenamed Eventide, was their answer to the valiant Fury's unrelenting rampage, a final gamble that would either restore balance or plunge the galaxy into even greater chaos. The device itself was powered by a rare energy source found in the heart of a dying star, and its construction was nearly impossible. But for the Nixari, impossible was merely a challenge to be met. As the Eventide neared completion, the Nixari sought a vessel capable of delivering this devastating technology into the heart of the valiant Fury's influence. They needed a ship that could maneuver through the hostile remnants of the destroyed fleets, a ship fast enough to avoid detection, yet powerful enough to survive any confrontation with the Fury. The answer came in the form of an unlikely candidate, a small, sleek cruiser from the Zantari Collective, a race known for their stealth technology and unparalleled speed. The ship, named the Phantom's Edge, had once been a part of the Tribunal's fleet, but it had been deemed expendable in their most recent battle. Now, however, it was humanity's last hope. The crew of the Phantom's Edge was an eclectic group. Veterans of the failed Tribunal campaign, rogue scientists, and a handful of mercenaries who had witnessed the Fury's destructive power firsthand. At the helm of the ship was none other than Captain Reagan Cole, the former commander of the Tribunal's flagship, now disillusioned by the collapse of their once proud empire. Reagan had always been a believer in the Tribunal's ideals: order, justice, and peace. But the destruction of the fleet had shattered his faith. Now, as the commander of a renegade vessel, he was forced to confront a truth that many in the galaxy were too afraid to acknowledge. No system of law, no fleet of ships, no army of soldiers could stand against the might of the valiant Fury. Under Reagan's command, the Phantom's Edge embarked on its perilous mission to deliver the Eventide device to the valiant Fury. The journey would take them into the heart of enemy territory, past the remnants of destroyed fleets and the eerie silence of once thriving star systems. The crew knew they were walking into the lion's den, and every moment brought them closer to their inevitable confrontation with the Fury. As they made their way through the void, the ship's AI, a relic from a previous era of war, remained eerily silent. The only voice in the command center was Reagan's, speaking to his crew in quiet determination. "Stay sharp. We can't afford to underestimate it. The valiant Fury won't give us a second chance." His words were grim, but the crew respected him. They had followed him into battle before, and they knew his resolve. He had always been a leader, brave, calculated, and relentless. Yet now, a flicker of doubt seemed to linger in his eyes. As the Phantom's edge moved deeper into enemy space, it became evident that they were not alone. Though the valiant Fury had not been detected, a shadow seemed to follow them. A whisper of something unseen, something lurking just outside the ship's sensors. It was a presence that could not be ignored. The Fury, perhaps, was watching. The tension on board was palpable, with every crew member acutely aware of the fact that the slightest misstep could mean their end. And yet, despite the danger, they continued on, driven by the singular purpose of their mission. Reagan knew that failure was not an option. If they didn't succeed, the galaxy would fall into an era of chaos that might never be reversed. Hours turned into days, and the crew began to notice anomalies in their sensors. The ship's AI, once the epitome of precision and reliability, began to glitch sporadically. Communication systems crackled with strange interference, and a sense of unease spread throughout the vessel. It was as if the valiant Fury itself had awakened, becoming aware of the intruder that sought to bring an end to its reign of terror. One evening, as Reagan stood in the command center, gazing out at the endless blackness of space, the ship's sensors began to pick up a strange energy signature. It was faint at first, barely a whisper of movement, but it grew stronger with each passing second. Suddenly the ship's lights flickered, and a low hum reverberated through the hull. The Fury was closing in. Reagan's heart raced. It was happening. The confrontation was no longer a matter of if, but when. In that moment, he realized something. Something that had been gnawing at him since the mission began. This wasn't just a battle of ships, of weapons, or tactics. It was a war of wills. The valiant Fury was not simply a ship. It was a manifestation of something deeper, something more terrifying. It represented the collapse of order itself, the destruction of everything the galaxy had worked to build. And now, standing on the precipice of the final battle, Reagan understood that victory would not come from technology alone. To defeat the valiant Fury, they would need something that no ship could ever provide. They would need the power of humanity's will. The atmosphere aboard the Phantom's Edge had shifted from tension to outright panic as the crew prepared for the inevitable. The hum of the ship's engines, once a familiar and comforting sound, now felt like the prelude to something far darker. The valiant Fury was coming, and the crew could feel it, like a predator circling its prey. The once quiet corridors of the ship were now filled with the hurried footsteps of nervous crew members, the soft murmur of voices struggling to maintain composure, and the relentless beeping of sensors tracking the approach of something vast and unstoppable. Captain Reagan Cole stood at the command console, his eyes fixed on the readouts in front of him. He had seen many battles in his time, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The valiant Fury was not like any enemy he had ever encountered. It wasn't just a ship. It was an embodiment of destruction, a weapon so potent that it seemed to have a will of its own. The data streaming in from the sensors indicated that the Fury was no longer simply following them. It had locked onto their position and was closing in fast. "Brace for impact!" Reagan's voice rang out across the ship, cutting through the growing chaos. "All hands to battle stations. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew scrambled into action, each member instinctively falling into the rhythm of combat. The crew of the Phantom's Edge was seasoned, used to the pulse-pounding chaos of war. But this was different. Every fiber of their being screamed that they were not just fighting for survival, but for the very future of the galaxy itself. The valiant Fury had already proven that it could annihilate anything that stood in its path, and now it was hunting them. Reagan's thoughts raced. They had no chance in a head-on confrontation. The Fury's firepower alone could obliterate their ship in a matter of seconds. Their only hope lay in the Eventide, the device that could neutralize the Fury's power and finally level the field. But the device had a fatal flaw. The quantum stabilizer was untested, and there was no guarantee it would work. Worse, it had to be deployed directly into the heart of the Fury's energy grid, a nearly impossible task given the ship's formidable defenses. Reagan's mind flashed to the memories of past campaigns, of the Tribunal's failed attempts to bring order to the galaxy. They had always believed in their superiority. Superior technology, superior fleets, superior strategy. Yet, they had been outmatched by something they couldn't even comprehend. The valiant Fury was no mere ship. It was an existential threat, an uncontrollable force that no amount of technology or tactics could hope to overcome without understanding what it truly was. As the Fury closed in, the crew was working furiously to prepare for the final phase of the plan. The Phantom's Edge was equipped with a series of advanced cloaking systems, making it nearly invisible to most sensors. But the Fury had proven its ability to track even the most sophisticated stealth technology, and now, the cloaking devices seemed more like a fleeting hope than a legitimate strategy. Raygon gritted his teeth as he studied the ship's rapidly approaching silhouette, its dark, massive form cutting through the void of space like a harbinger of doom. "Captain!" The ship's AI, a cold, emotionless voice, interrupted his thoughts. "Enemy vessel, Valiant Fury, now within firing range. Preparing to engage defensive systems." Reagan's mind snapped back to the present. There was no time for second thoughts. "Activate evasive maneuvers. Target their weak points. Go for their propulsion systems. We need to slow them down. Give us some breathing room." The ship shuddered as the AI engaged the evasive thrusters, sending the Phantom's Edge into a sharp turn. The Fury's weapons lit up the void with deadly precision, blasts of energy streaking toward them. The ship's shields flared under the assault, crackling with the force of each impact, but they held, barely. Reagan's heart raced as he gripped the armrest of his command chair, his eyes flicking between the battle readouts and the growing shadow of the Fury. "This is it," he thought. "Either we pull this off, or the galaxy is doomed." Suddenly, a burst of static filled the command center. The ship's sensors blinked erratically, and the shields flickered. Reagan's mind screamed in disbelief. A jamming field, a pulse powerful enough to disrupt all communications and sensor systems, was being emitted from the Valiant Fury. Without their ability to see, hear, or understand the Fury's movements, the Phantom's Edge was blind, vulnerable. "Get us out of here!" Reagan shouted, but it was too late. The Fury's weapons fired again, this time with devastating accuracy. The ship lurched violently as explosions tore through the hull. Crew members screamed in pain, and alarms blared in every corner of the vessel. The force of the impact threw Reagan forward, his head smashing into the console. Darkness crept over his vision, but he fought to stay conscious, knowing that the lives of his crew and the fate of the galaxy rested on his ability to lead them through this storm. As the smoke and chaos filled the command center, Reagan's vision cleared just enough to see the hulking form of the Valiant Fury approaching. Inexorably drawing closer, the Fury's weapons charged for another strike. This was it, the final blow. But then, just as all seemed lost, a voice crackled through the static, faint, but unmistakable. It was a voice Reagan had not heard in years, a voice that carried with it a history of pain, betrayal, and hope. "Reagan, do you remember the old days?" It was Commander Narration, a former comrade from the Tribunal's glory days, now a rogue operative with a reputation for turning the tide of impossible battles. Her ship, the Eclipse Dawn, had been trailing the Fury, keeping a safe distance, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "We've got one chance, Captain," Naris's voice came through the crackling line. "We're sending you the coordinates for a blind jump. It'll take you right into their weak zone, their core defense systems. It's a gamble, but it's your best shot at delivering the Eventide." Reagan knew the risks. Jumping into the heart of enemy territory, with no sensors, no shields, and no time to prepare, was madness. But it was the only chance they had left. "Understood," Reagan replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Prepare for the jump. We're going in." The final phase of the mission was about to begin, and Reagan knew this would be the true test of humanity's resolve. Whether it was the firepower of their warships, the cunning of their strategy, or the unyielding will to fight that would decide the outcome of this war. The Phantom's Edge plunged into the abyss of space, its destination unknown, but its purpose clear. The Valiant Fury was not just a ship, it was a challenge, an unstoppable force that needed to be defeated not with weapons, but with the resolve to endure, to face the impossible head-on. The jump was like nothing Reagan had ever experienced before. The vast, eternal void of space bent and twisted around the Phantom's Edge as it plunged through the unknown, the ship's systems screaming in protest against the stress. Time seemed to warp, the seconds stretching endlessly, as the universe itself seemed to collapse into a singularity. Crew members gripped onto whatever they could, their bodies pinned against their seats, breath caught in their throats, as the ship careened toward the heart of the Fury's defenses. Reagan's eyes were locked on the readouts, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the coordinates Nerys had sent flash across the console, coordinates that would bring them within the Fury's kill zone, a place where few ships dared venture. The Fury's energy readings were spiking, indicating it had detected their approach, but there was no turning back now. This blind jump was their only hope, and Reagan trusted Nerys. She had always been resourceful, a commander who thrived under pressure. As the ship continued its wild descent, the Phantom's Edge collided with the edge of the Fury's detection grid, the impact sending shockwaves throughout the vessel. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the ship was caught in the gravitational pull of the Fury's massive energy field. The shields flickered dangerously, barely holding under the immense pressure. The Valiant Fury's weapons were already charging, targeting the incoming threat. "Captain!" Lieutenant Carell shouted, her voice strained with urgency. "We've lost power to the aft shields. Our engines are failing. We won't survive another blast like that." The cold realization hit Reagan like a punch to the gut. The Phantom's Edge was on the verge of collapse, and the Fury was closing in for the kill. But there was one final chance, one last hope. The Eventide. With the coordinates locked, they were right on the edge of the Fury's core defense systems. If they could just get the device close enough, they could disable the Fury's overwhelming power just long enough to make a difference. Reagan's gaze shifted to the device, an intricate piece of quantum technology that had been months in the making. If the Eventide was deployed at the right moment, it would send a massive destabilizing pulse through the Fury's energy core. But that required them to get within the Fury's defenses, right into the heart of the chaos. There was no room for error. One wrong move, and the ship would be reduced to nothing more than debris in the cold vacuum of space. The countdown had begun. 30 seconds. The seconds felt like hours, the silence between Reagan's breaths deafening as the Fury's weapons fired again. A massive bolt of energy struck the ship's hull, tearing through the port side and causing a cascade of sparks to erupt in the command center. The walls groaned under the strain, the ship's frame beginning to warp and bend under the relentless assault! "We're out of time!" Lieutenant Carell screamed. Reagan's hand hovered over the comms console. There was no order he could give to save the crew. No maneuver that could outpace the Fury now. They were too close. The Eventide had to be deployed, or everything they had fought for would be in vain. "Do it," Reagan commanded, his voice low but firm. In an instant, the quantum device was activated, the ship's core humming to life, as the pulse of energy began to build. The crew braced themselves for impact as the Phantom's Edge lurched violently again. The system's countdown ticked closer to 0, and Reagan could feel the weight of the galaxy's fate bearing down on him. "Prepare to eject," Carell shouted, fear evident in her voice. But Reagan had already made his decision. He stood tall, watching as the device in the hold prepared to disengage from the ship, its energy building exponentially. The Eventide had to be delivered to the Fury's core before the ship was obliterated. His crew had done their part. Now it was up to this single device to decide the future of their struggle. Then, everything went silent. A pulse of energy, bright and blinding, shot forward from the ship, racing toward the Fury's core. The Phantom's Edge trembled as the pulse collided with the Fury's defenses. Time seemed to stretch out in that one defining moment. The ship and its crew holding their breath, hoping against all odds that the device would work. For an agonizing moment, there was nothing but the hum of strained engines and the crackling of the comms. Then, without warning, the Fury's power grid flickered. For the first time since the battle began, the massive warship's energy systems began to fail, its weapons stuttering to a halt. The valiant Fury, once a symbol of unstoppable destruction, was suddenly vulnerable, crippled by the very technology humanity had created to take it down. The Phantom's edge shook violently as it pulled away from the Fury's collapsing energy field. The threat now diminished, but not gone. Reagan's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging through his veins as he watched the Fury begin to break apart, its massive form crumbling under the weight of its own failed defenses. The crew erupted into cheers, but Reagan knew better than to let his guard down. The Fury was not the only threat humanity faced. There would be more, bigger, deadlier enemies waiting for them in the galaxy. This was only the beginning. But for now, as the crew of the Phantom's Edge limped through, the shattered remnants of space, the weight of their victory was undeniable. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had taken down the most powerful weapon the galaxy had ever known. The eventide had worked, the Fury had fallen, and the future had just taken a turn. Reagan stood at the command center, staring at the stars outside. This was humanity's moment. A moment to prove that, even in the face of impossible odds, they could survive, adapt, and overcome. The war was far from over. But with their ultimate weapon in hand, humanity had shown the galaxy what they were truly capable of. And as Reagan turned back to his crew, a new resolve burned in his eyes, one that spoke of challenges yet to come and of a future they would build, no matter the cost. If you enjoyed this battle, share your thoughts in the comments. What's the next challenge you think humanity will face? Let's hear your ideas, and don't forget to share this with fellow sci-fi fans who crave epic stories like this.